Another season is upon us. Freshmen arrive wide-eyed with dreams of future glory, while seniors prepare for their last chance at immortality. There are only a handful of these opportunities in a man's life, a handful of chances to distinguish yourself from the rest. It's on these fields where history is made, where legends begin and heroes triumph. Traditions tell the story of what you represent, of those that forge the legacy you uphold. When you come charging out of the tunnel, 100,000 people will be watching your every move. How you respond to that pressure is what defines you. These are the moments that reveal your toughness, your determination, and your pride. The Roughnecks on the Sooner Schooner. Ralphie charging out of the gate. And Chief Osceola planting his spear. The time has come. Your time is now.
You know, there's always a natural amount of animosity when it comes down to talking about sequels, because we've certainly seen some things where, maybe the original was really good, but then we saw the sequel and the sequel just turns into something that ends up being really egregious and never to be spoken about ever again. But then every once in a while, we get ourselves a sequel that ends up living up to expectations or even exceeding those expectations, whether it be, one of the future Terminator movies, Terminator 2, for example, the Rocky movies. Maybe you're thinking about Usher's Confessions type of series as well. Or how about, most importantly, bold predictions here on College Football Red Zone? And man, let me say this, the bold predictions from last week, it was an incredibly fun time. And it was such an incredibly fun time that I had to do a part 2 here tonight. We had to do bold predictions once again, not only digging deeper into what we originally had on Twitter, but some of you guys came through with some bold predictions of your own here on YouTube as well. So some of those from the YouTube comments from the previous bold prediction show, they're going to be right around tonight, and we're going to talk through them, talking about some of those Twitter ones that we received as well. And so it just means that overall, we're going to have a really good show tonight. It's only me because, we are standing alone and we're standing strong. But with that being said, we're still going to have a great show tonight. And hopefully you guys enjoy yourself in the live show. And if you do, make sure you do a couple of things for me real fast. Hit that like button as well as hit that subscribe button as well. If you do happen to be brand new to the channel, really does help me out tremendously. Lots of work that goes into what we're currently doing with our video series, with those first look series of all 138 teams, as well as doing these live shows multiple times a week. We'll have some administrative at the end of the show tonight that we're going to have to talk through real fast as a family. But with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into these bold predictions. But before we do so, just a quick refresher real fast. I will say this about the bold predictions. What I'm doing is that we're going to rate every bold prediction that we see here tonight on a 5-star scale. 1 star being, hey, this is absolutely going to happen. And 5 stars being, there's no chance that's happening. You are on absolute drugs. You need to be drug tested. That's kind of how we're doing things here on a 1 to 5 scale in terms of bold predictions. And if it's a consistent 4.5 stars, so if I think it's 4.5 stars or higher and it actually does hit at the end of the year, then what I am going to do is I'm going to donate to your favorite schools like NIL fund. I think that's going to be the tentative thing that we're going to go ahead and do here. So with all of that in mind, let's go ahead and get things rolling here tonight with our bold predictions. So let's see what we have for us between YouTube as well as from Twitter as well. Let's go ahead and dive into this first one. And it comes from actually one of my co-hosts and a good friend here on the channel, O&O Sports, my boy Colton. He mentioned in the live chat previously that, hey, a team from Indiana is going to win the national championship this year. So for me, I looked at this and listen, it's very specific of a prediction. We're talking about realistically, is Notre Dame or Indiana going to win the national championship this year? Because I would imagine that we're not really taking Purdue seriously. We're hoping, I'm sure Purdue is hoping that they can make it to a bowl game, but we're not really expecting Purdue to be a national championship contender by any means. And I actually looked their stuff up on FanDuel before the show. If you wanted to throw in a bet slip on a Purdue national championship, those odds right now are plus 100,000, which is basically FanDuel telling you that it's almost impossible that this is going to happen. Ball State, no disrespect to Ball State, but we haven't seen a G6 program win a national championship in a very long time, let alone win a playoff game in the current 12-team format. So really, it comes down to, does Notre Dame or Indiana win the national championship? And so to answer the previous question, I actually do have this as a 4-star rating, 4 stars out of 5. And it comes down to this. It comes down to really a numbers game when you're talking about the college football playoff, right? So candidly, and we talked about my playoff predictions, at least of how things stand here in the springtime. And here's what I'll say is I do have Indiana and Notre Dame at the end of the season for that national championship game. I have those two actually meeting up in the national championship. So I definitely don't want to dismiss the idea that an Indiana team wins the national championship. Matter of fact, as of how things stand for me right now, I have an all Indiana national championship at the end of the year. But with that being said, you also have to consider it's either Notre Dame or Indiana winning it all, or you're talking about the rest of the field winning the national championship at the end of the season. So there are some really good teams in here that I do think have either most of the ingredients or all of the ingredients to win a national championship at the end of the season. Well, I mean, we first have to talk about obviously possibly the number one team in the country and at least the odds-on favorite to win a national championship right now, according to FanDuel. That is Ohio State with plus 550 odds. Texas is getting some hype under another year of Arch Manning starting at quarterback at plus 750. That's a team that should be considered. Oregon was surprisingly one of the younger teams in the power conference ranks last year, and they made it all the way to the semifinals of the college football playoff. Dante Moore is back as well. Does Dan Lanning break through? Certainly can never count out the Georgia Bulldogs under Kirby Smart, who at the bare minimum, if you don't want to admit that he's the best coach in college football right now, you do have to at least sit here and acknowledge that you got to go ahead and he's at least a top 5 coach, right? So there's at least that you have to throw into consideration. What do we think about Texas Tech? I think Texas Tech has all the ingredients to win a national championship. You're talking about an experienced coach. You're talking about an experienced quarterback, and the roster is also good enough to win a national title. It's just how do they handle competition outside of the Big 12? That's actually good competition. That's going to be the million-dollar question there. And then how about a few other teams that I think would be worthy long shots? If you want to talk about LSU with that completely revamped roster under Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss with Pete Golding as a head man, inexperienced, but Trinidad Chambliss is certainly capable of winning a game on his own. We saw that last year in the college football playoff. And how about Alabama? Inexperienced at quarterback, but Kalen DeBoer, one of the top 5 or 10 coaches in college football. So for Kalen DeBoer, Alabama could be a team that could be worth taking a flyer on in terms of national championship odds as well. LSU and Ole Miss have plus 2,200 odds, and Alabama has plus 2,500 odds as well. So I mentioned all of those people and all of those teams because it's either Indiana or Notre Dame, or you're taking the rest of the field. So if you're just playing the numbers game, I'm inclined to take the field, but it's certainly not impossible. I think like I mentioned, there is a world where we do end up seeing a Indiana and a Notre Dame. They meet up in the national championship game, at least for me, at the end of the season. But also compared to the field, I would lean towards the field in terms of being more likely to win a national title. So, we're talking about 4 stars here in terms of how bold this of a take it is. It's unlikely, but it's not a crazy thing either, especially because I am someone, candidly, that has Notre Dame winning the national championship as of how things stand as of right now. But we do have a few more bold takes here tonight that I definitely want to go under, and definitely want to appreciate the fact that you guys are coming through and showing some love. And if you're enjoying what you see here, man, gotta follow my main man, Miami Flow. Follow his advice, and his advice is hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. And also, if you have a hot take that you actually do believe could end up happening, then definitely let me know in the live chat as well. It would be included in a future show moving forward. But yeah, man, let's go ahead and get into the next bold take that we had. Also coming through in the previous live show, and shouting out to Arc Trooper, who is a relatively new subscriber. Appreciate your support, by the way, my man. And this Arc Trooper is mentioning that Tulsa getting into the American Conference this year, and getting into the college football playoff. Rain Kane, I'm out of here. So they're very high on Tulsa, and I talked about it on the team deep dives that I've already did, particularly on Tulsa. I think Tulsa is going to be a better football team than what they were last year. I thought Trey Lane's team really showed some signs of life in the month of November, and showed some promise going into the year as well. But at the same time, I actually think that this is an extremely bold prediction, so much so that for the first time here tonight, I am going to go ahead and give out my a 5-star rating on Tulsa winning the American and getting into the college football playoff. Even if it was just Tulsa winning the American, not making it to the college football playoff, I would give them a 5-star rating. Now, some of you might be confused. For those of you that watched the live show last Monday, when we kind of had a similar hot take with Ball State winning the MAC, I gave it 4.5 stars. So might be a little bit of confusion there. So here's my thing with Tulsa. I think Tulsa is going to have a better baseline than Ball State. I think the baseline for Tulsa is that they're going to be flirting with bowl eligibility. I actually think 6-6 is pretty reasonable. That's going to be annotated on that Tulsa first look that we did here for our ongoing. We do have going on right about now. That being said, at the same time, I also look at what we have going on with Tulsa football, and I got to look at that upside. And I look at the upside of Tulsa football right now. I think even in a best case scenario for the Tulsa Golden Hurricane in year number 2 of Trey Lamb and his tenure, I think that even in the upside of that, I'm not necessarily looking at a football team that's going to be making it to the American title game. Because even in their best case scenario, I have Tulsa as a ceiling being 7-5 right now. And that does include a few losses that I think they are going to take in conference play. That does include Navy on the road. I think Navy is always a dangerous team to go up against. Now that we're in this new era of college football and a lot of teams don't have continuity, that's a different case here for the military academies. Navy has really turned itself around over the last couple of years. You're going to have to go on the road to play against that Navy football team. I think that's a tough ask to beat them. Tulane has been one of the best G5 programs in the country. Going to see some new leadership there and some new faces under Will Hall, who was a failed head coach at Southern Miss, but maybe learned from his mistakes. And Tulane is still going to roll, I believe, as one of the better teams in the American. You also have to go on the road and play them down in the Bayou as well. That will be a challenging road game in its own right. And then how about at the end of the season as well? You're talking about UTSA on the road, and I talked about it over on Reed's show. I think UTSA is capable of winning the American this year. I think they are that talented a football team on offense, and I believe in Jeff Taylor as a head coach. I absolutely do. You also got to go play on the road and play against that same UTSA football team. And if you paid attention to UTSA last year, they were unstoppable in the Alamo Dome. So with all those teams in mind, I look at Tulsa, and at best, I think they're going to finish 5-3 in conference play. With some toss-up games thrown in there as well. Like North Texas is not an automatic win. Rice, because it's on the road, I won't consider that an automatic win either. Same goes for Army and FAU. I don't think those are automatic wins by any means. So all of that in consideration and all of that in mind as well, I look at Tulsa as a 5-3 team in conference play. And I think maximum, considering that the American does not have any divisions, it's straight up the best two teams from the conference go to the conference championship game. I think maximum 2 losses is going to be the bare minimum threshold for American Conference Championship consideration. And even at 2 losses, and we saw this kind of play out last year as well, you're going to hope that those 2 losses are not to any particular team that is also in the hunt to go to the title game as well. I think ideally, 1 loss, you're okay. So if Tulsa does want to make it to the title game, you're talking about flipping 2 of those 3 games that I think are safe losses for them right now, either beating Navy on the road, beating Tulane, or beating UTSA, beating 2 of those 3 teams on the road, which I think is a tremendous ask. So again, even though I think the baseline is relatively high for Tulsa, seeing them as a 6-6 team at the moment, I think because of where I have their ceiling, which I don't have their ceiling much higher than what I currently have them as a baseline type of team, I just don't see Tulsa winning the American this year. I think 2027, if they could have a relative amount of continuity going into the following spring, 2027 could be the year to circle in terms of making it to the conference championship game and possibly making some noise for the college football playoff, which I haven't even talked about the CFP portion of this. I don't even think they're winning the American, so I'm not going to even delve into CFP considerations. To be honest with you, I don't even think they're the best team in their conference. They're certainly, I don't think, going to be the primary representative for the G6 at this time. But we still have a few more, and those were the 2 of the best ones that I saw over on the YouTube live chat. Which, if you are watching in the live chat right now, you happen to have a bold prediction, let me know what bold prediction is on your mind right now. Let me know either there, or if you're watching this in the comments section after the fact, go ahead and leave a comment for me as well. I do read all the comments, and I try to read all the chat messages as well. But with that being said, we got a few more bold predictions here tonight. Just definitely want to give that little tidbit down below. So let's see what the next bold prediction is going to be. And it comes from our friends, College Sports Crew, who says that Oklahoma State wins the Big 12 this year. And shout out to College Sports Crew. I actually remember it was either last spring or last summer when we were starting out College Football Redzone for the first time. We were a brand new entity, and we were going under a different entity at the time. In any given Saturday, the College Sports Crew folks who did rebrand since then, they were actually one of the first people to invite me on their show. So I'm always appreciative for College Sports Crew and their follow, and like true diehards of College Football Redzone, one of the first A1s since day ones on both Twitter and YouTube combined. But let's talk in specifically to what they have in terms of them winning the Big 12. So this is going to be considered, I think, a little bit on the controversial side of things, but I'm actually going to go ahead and give this a 5 as well, guys. Listen, I know that there's going to be a lot talked about this offensive side of the ball. They have an incredible quarterback in Drew Messemaker. They have an incredible running back as well. They have an incredible wide receiver, and it's a completely revamped offense, an offense that bare minimum is going to at least show signs of life but an offense in particular, I think it's going to be pretty good at worst, right? I think this offense is going to be fun to watch this year, and Oklahoma State football in general is going to be fun to watch again, which immediately is going to be a step up in comparison to last year, right? I think that's all you can ask for after the disaster of the 2025 campaign, where you're looking at Oklahoma State. Not only were they absolutely awful, but they were boring to watch, and they were almost bored to tears out there in Stillwater. So Mike Gundy is out. Eric Morris is officially in as a result of that. But I do have some concerns about the defensive side of the football, because we joked about it on the show a couple of times, how Oklahoma State is now the Oklahoma State Mean Green, or we're talking about the North Texas Cowboys, right, up there in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So you really look at that defensive side of football, and you really take a look at their three biggest games that they played in all year. That defense absolutely got exposed. I'm talking about in the Tulane game when they were playing in the conference championship last year out there, and which ended up being hosted by Tulane. You want to talk about that regular season matchup as well. It was a big midweek matchup between North Texas and South Florida. That game happening in North Texas. And then even at the end of the year, a game that they won in a bowl game in exciting fashion against San Diego State's pretty good Mountain West football team at the time. Oklahoma State defensively got exposed in all of those games. Here's what I mean by that. So particularly in the USF game, they got blasted for 60-plus points in that particular game. They got blown out of their own building. It was a tough look in a game that, for a midweek game, had quite a bit of exposure, especially for those that paid a little bit more attention to G5 football. So they ended up getting blown out 63-36 in that one. And then in the American Conference Championship game, they also gave up 30-plus points in what was a double-digit loss to Tulane on the road as well. And even against San Diego State, a game that they won regardless, their defense allowed 47 points to a San Diego State football team where at that point they were struggling a little bit to put points up on the board. Prior to that bowl game that they experienced, the last time that San Diego State put up more than 30 points or more in a game, it was October 11th of that season. So after that Nevada game that happened on the road, they didn't score 30-plus points again until that bowl game. So I mentioned all of these things because a lot of the defensive transfers did end up coming from North Texas. And because of that, I have some concerns about the defensive side of the football going into this year. And we talked about Tulane being one of the better teams that North Texas faced last year. Ditto to San Diego State and ditto to USF as well. There's quite a few teams on Oklahoma State's schedule that are just as good as those teams last year, or you could even say possibly be even better. I mean, Houston on the road, and Houston was ranked in my top 25 at the end of the year. You also have Kansas State that looks to be revived under Colin Klein. It's got an incredibly talented quarterback in Avery Johnson, can be an absolute dual threat with both his legs and with his arm as well when he is accurate. Texas Tech obviously looks to be an overwhelming favorite to win the Big 12 this year. And that's really another element as well. It's not even that their schedule is kind of tough. I look at Texas Tech, and I just feel that Texas Tech is just on a different level right now. They're just almost as if they're in a different tier of their own. So you're really sitting back and asking yourself, okay, for Texas Tech, you essentially have to beat Texas Tech, whether it's in the regular season to help prevent the Red Raiders from making it to the Big 12 title game in the first place, or you're going to meet them a second time in Arlington. And yes, you're going to have a little bit of a better understanding of what they do because you've seen them the first time. But again, Texas Tech will also have that same advantage as well in terms of knowing your stuff too. So I worry about that. Arizona State is also on the road as well. Arizona State's going to have a solid team under Kenny Dillingham. So I think about all these things, and I just have a tough time picturing a best case scenario where they win the Big 12 and go to the Big 12 championship. Matter of fact, I would even go far to say, because of those defensive concerns that I have, I think they're more likely to miss a bowl game than they are to make it to the Big 12 title game. I'm going to be that honest with you. I have a baseline right now of 5-7 because I don't think that their defense is going to be good enough to where, unless their offense shows up and has really explosive performances week in and week out, I don't see them being the type of team that's going to roll through its Big 12 schedule, right? So I have a 5 stars out of this, but if I'm wrong, I'm definitely going to make sure that I donate to the Oklahoma State NIL fund because I am a man of my word. When it comes to that type of stuff, I just have a hard time seeing the vision. I'm going to be really honest with you on that. I think it's going to be a really fun team, but I think it's going to be also the type of team where you're going to have to put up 35 to 40 points and still hope that you can make something happen. And I've been told that, hey, it's the way that they play, that might not be as much of an issue. You still have to eventually get stops, right? So could be seeing a flashback of old Big 12 football in terms of the defensive prowess there, but going to be a very fascinating team to watch, especially when the fall rolls around. Okay, so we got a couple of more bold predictions for tonight. Because I am all by myself, I'm going to go ahead and take a drink of water. Really appreciate you guys listening through to the live show tonight. If you're enjoying yourself, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well. If you do happen to be brand new, I genuinely appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. Definitely helps in growing the channel as well. Let's go ahead and keep things rolling here with what else we got in the holster in terms of bold predictions. So next one does come from Dr. Von Buckeye. At Top Tier Buckeyes mentions that, hey, that an SEC team will play but lose in a national championship game first time in 3 years. And yes, it has in fact been 3 years since we have seen an SEC team make it to the national championship. Actually, the last time that we did see that happen, I believe it was 2022 Georgia. The Georgia Bulldogs ended up winning in that national championship game. They ended up repeating, and they were actually the last team to be repeating as national champions. Still waiting, at least in terms of my lifetime, and I'm closing in on 30, seeing a team be able to repeat. We haven't seen the repeat yet, at least since World War II, when Minnesota won it all a third time during the World War II era. So fascinating to see if we ever get to that point. But going to Dr. Von Buckeye's prediction, this one I'm not as is not as high as a take as the last two that we have seen here so far tonight. So I'm gonna go a little bit lower here. I'm gonna go with 3.5 stars. I think this is a 3.5 star prediction because you got 16 teams in the SEC. And you're considered one of the best conferences in the country. Some would argue that it is the best conference in college football. Some would say that it's the second best conference behind the Big Ten based on that national championship prowess. It depends on your criteria. What I will say is that the SEC is a relatively deep conference, though, and there certainly is a fair number of teams in the SEC that have enough talent to make a realistic run at the national championship if they make it into the college football playoff. And matter of fact, and I've mentioned this specifically when I did my spring playoff predictions earlier in the springtime, I actually do have 5 SEC teams making it to the college football playoff. So I have right now Texas going in as the SEC champion. Alabama will get in virtue of making it to Atlanta. And then your other at-larges are going to be Ole Miss, Georgia, and LSU. So you're talking about almost half of the playoff field being a part of this conference and being part of this college football playoff. So just looking at things from a pure numbers game, and I'm going to omit the G5 and the G6 team that would get in as the auto bid, because much as I appreciate that the G6 does have that auto bid, and I think they should have the opportunity to go to the national championship game, I don't believe that it should be one of those cases where the G6 would break off and have their own playoff. I don't think that they should have to do that. But at the same time, I'm not counting on the G6 to actually win a national championship. So you're talking about 11 teams that may have more realistic shots to win it all, and 5 of those teams being the SEC. That right there, you have a 50% chance of winning it all. And you want to delve even further into actually making the national championship game and being one of 2 spots. It's about a 50% chance. So at least if I see how things end up going and they do end up getting 5 teams in the SEC, I don't think that's crazy. And another thing about it, and I talked about it earlier on the show tonight too, an SEC team losing in the national championship, I actually think that there's 3 teams out there that have all the ingredients to win a national championship. And I don't have any of them from the SEC, though. I think Texas Tech has all the ingredients. I think Indiana has all the ingredients. And I think that Notre Dame has all the ingredients. So those are the 3 teams that I'm looking at in terms of being the most likely to win a national championship. So if it comes down to an SEC team versus those 3 teams that I'm talking about, I'm going to go with those 3 teams every single time. And so from that perspective, this is not crazy to me. Now, you got to make it to the national championship. So minimum, you got to win 2 games to get there, assuming that you get that top 4 bye. Or if you're not as lucky to get that bye, you're talking about having to win 3 games against really high level competition to get there. Doesn't matter who you are. That's incredibly hard to do. Ohio State last year was one of the most talented teams in college football. They were a top 2 team, only seated behind Indiana. They didn't even make it to the semifinal. And it's not crazy to think that Ohio State was a top 4 or 5 team. They just happened to run into a Miami squad that was good enough to compete with Indiana on the field and had a realistic shot to win the national championship. It's really hard. So one of those SEC teams have to get there. But if you're saying to yourself you have a 50% chance because there's 2 slots in the national championship game and you got 11 teams that have a shot to make it there, that's not a super crazy take for me. So I'm going to go with 3.5 stars here. It's unlikely, but I don't think that it's beyond the realm of possibility. Definitely don't think that at all. Do have one more bold prediction coming up here tonight. And again, I really appreciate you guys coming through and enjoying the show, whether you are watching from Twitter, you're watching from Twitch, or if you're watching from YouTube as well. I really appreciate it. No matter where you're watching, if you want to hit that follow button, if it's not on YouTube, and if you do want to hit that subscribe button, if this is happening on YouTube for you right now, I would genuinely appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. It helps grow the social media platforms, as we got some really great things planned throughout the rest of the spring and summertime, and of course in the fall as well. So you definitely want to be along for the ride and have a real opportunity to be an A1 since day one as well. So here we go. What does the final bold prediction say? And it's going to come from Rhino Man 57, where he mentions that Hawaii will be a CFP team. All right. So Hawaii Rainbow Warriors, I really like them, right? I like their coach and Timmy Jang. I really like their stadium and their vibes, and I really like their quarterback in Micah Awahado, who was one of the most productive quarterbacks, especially for those of you that are in the college fantasy football space. Micah Awahado was absolutely incredible for you. So I'm going to go with 4.5 stars here. And here's why I'm going to go with 4.5 stars. I do look at Hawaii, and I look at Hawaii as a team that, at least from a baseline perspective, I do think that Hawaii can make it to the Mountain West title game. And from there, you're going to at least have a puncher's chance to win the Mountain West, which is one of the things that you are going to need to do. Because while you could sit back and get away with, all right, the rules have changed, it's not necessarily, you don't have to be a conference champion, but you do have to be the highest ranked G6 team, regardless of whether you're a conference champion or not, which I actually don't mind that rule because for UConn Huskies in the past, their only path to make it to the college football playoff was they were going to have to get an at-large bid. And you see how this committee is. They're not going to really show much love to the G6 just from a strength of schedule standpoint. But going back to Hawaii, though, in specific, so just from a baseline perspective, they have a chance. I think they make it to the Mountain West title game. And from there, they have a shot to win the Mountain West. What else is happening across the country, though? Does Boise State end up disappointing? I think Boise State is, for me right now, one of, actually scratch that, the favorite to represent the G6 this year in the college football playoff. I think Boise State is going to have to be disappointing to go ahead and, miss out on this college football playoff. And especially, and just in general, what's happening in the Pac-12. And I've talked about this earlier on the show. The Pac-12, I think, could be the best conference in the G6. So you're going to want to have some carnage first and foremost in the Pac-12, just to have the Pac-12 eliminate itself. And then what else happens around the country? I mean, James Madison really fascinates me as well. They were just in the college football playoff last year, one of the bigger brands in the G6. They have a really notable head coach in Billy Napier as well. So, but the good news, at least for James Madison, in comparison to Hawaii, James Madison doesn't have any power conference opponents. Hawaii, on the other hand, does. So let's lay it out in terms of how does Hawaii actually make the college football playoff? So first of all, you got to handle business within your conference. And I think handling business in your conference, basically go undefeated in conference play. Go undefeated or at most lose one game in conference play. / also make sure you handle business against New Mexico State as well, because they're part of your non-conference schedule. Ditto with Sacramento State, who's also on your non-conference schedule. Basically handled your G6 opponents. At most, you could lose to one of those 10 games in the regular season, at most. But then it gets into the issue in terms of the power conference opponents. You got Stanford on the road, and you're going to have Arizona State on the road as well, about the midway point of your season. So, you're Hawaii. The committee likes teams that play against power conference opponents and beats those power conference teams. And I know that Stanford isn't expected to be too terribly good, but they are going to be at least tangibly better than last year. If you're Hawaii and you want to make this happen, you have to beat Stanford on the road, because I don't think that Stanford is still not going to be that great. And if you lose to a team that ultimately misses out on a bowl game, which I think Stanford is going to miss out on that bowl game, that would really hurt your chances in terms of getting in, because it's going to look like a black eye on the resume. Then there comes the issue. Let's say you handle business against Stanford, and maybe they are capable if their offense shows up to play, and Stanford isn't as good as what we expected them initially. You also have the Arizona State game. If you beat Stanford, you don't have to win this game. But it would be important to at least not get blown out. If you beat Stanford, you're competitive against Arizona State, because Arizona State at least is going to be a good team, maybe not a team that isn't good enough to make it to the Big 12 title game, but at least they're going to be good enough to where at the end of the year, we think that Arizona State could get consideration to get ranked in the top 25 towards the back end of the year. If you're at least competitive in that game, beat Stanford, handle your business against the group of 6 opponents that you have on your schedule, plus win the Mountain West, you have a legitimate shot, especially if the Pac-12 cannibalizes itself. And then at that point, you would also have a better resume than James Madison, who I think has a real shot to get a G6 college football playoff bid as well. But James Madison doesn't have any power conference opponents. And that's not James Madison's fault because they originally did. But that game against Virginia Tech got canceled. They replaced it with San Diego State, which again, good team, part of the Pac-12. But at the same time, it's not going to be perceived the same for James Madison. That's just how the cookie crumbles. If you do end up beating Arizona State, or if you do end up losing to Stanford, you have to beat Arizona State. I just don't think that a team that has multiple losses on his resume, as well as maybe not looking as good as maybe what they need to in conference play, plus the fact that almost the entire, actually scratch that, the entire Pac-12 will have a tougher strength of schedule. Hawaii is going to have a tough time having that argument. I actually think there would be a world if it comes down to a 10-3 Pac-12 team that's the Pac-12 champ, and it's the 11-2 Hawaii team, and the 11-2 Hawaii Rainbow Warriors don't have that power conference win, then at that point, I think the committee would prefer a Pac-12 team, because what we've seen from this committee, at least last year, maybe it will continue into this year, is at that point we'll see the Pac-12 team get the nod. Even though I think if you win games on your schedule and you win an extraordinarily high clip, you should be considered for a college football playoff appearance. Imagine that. Rewarding teams that win games on their schedule, because I know strength of schedule is important, but I think at times we kind of swung the pendulum too far the other way, where strength of schedule is the end-all be-all. And I don't think it should be the end-all be-all. I think strength of schedule should be used to compare teams of somewhat similar records, right? So 4.5 stars, there's a possibility that this happens, but I think it's really important that they find a way to beat Stanford or Arizona State. So that does conclude all of the bold predictions that we do have here on the show tonight. And I appreciate you guys being able to come through and help a brother out. It's been nice to go ahead and enjoy ourselves in bold prediction season. But I will say this before we sign off, just do have a couple of things of note. So as you guys obviously know, we do have the NFL draft that is going to be coming up here starting on Thursday, and it's going to run through Friday and Saturday. So normally we would have a live show not only on these Monday nights, but we would also have a live show on the Thursday nights as well. So with that said, because of the fact that the NFL draft is happening and we want to celebrate our best college players from last season, seeing that NFL dream come into fruition and come true, at the same time, we are not going to compete with the NFL draft. We're just not there yet. So we will not have a live show on Thursday. Tonight's live show will be the only live show that we are going to be planning on doing in terms of actual live streams, right? So that's the first point of order. And then second point of order, the other point of order is we certainly have some things that like in the works over here that hopefully I can announce for you guys in the next couple of days. So if you're watching this on Twitter, keep an eye on the Twitter feed, because we could be making a debut of a new segment here in College Football Red Zone. So I'm hoping that we can turn that dream into a reality. Still gotta work out some logistics for a couple of things, but definitely keep an eye out, especially on Twitter, which is where I post all of my announcements, right? So, hey, with that being said, really appreciate you guys coming through and enjoying the live show. If you enjoyed yourself, again, make sure you do a couple of things before you sign off for me, man. Make sure you go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. This is Jake from College Football Red Zone signing off. Hoping you guys are all out there having a good night.